Tolkien confessed that a scene from his books had moved him to tears as he committed it to paper. Despite the emotional impact this scene had on Tolkien, it was excluded from Peter Jackson's adaptation of The Lord of the Rings, not even making it into the extended cut. The scene in question captures a poignant moment shared between Frodo, Sam, and Gollum as they climb the treacherous steps of the pass of Cirith Ungol, drawing ever closer to the lair of Shelob. Samwise Gamgee is known for his unwavering loyalty and enduring love for Frodo. Thus, he is a beloved favorite of many fans. However, Tolkien, always attuned to the complexities of his characters, saw more within Sam than simple, untainted ideals. In Letter 246, Tolkien provides insight into Sam's character, revealing the darker aspects of his identity. Sam was confident and, deep down, a bit conceited, but his arrogance had been transformed by his dedication to Frodo. He did not consider himself heroic or even brave, but rather focused on his duty and devotion to his master, which carried an inevitably prideful and possessive undertone. It is difficult to separate this from the dedication of those who perform such service. However, it prevented him from fully understanding the master he loved and from following him in his gradual journey toward the nobility of service to the unlovable and recognition of the injured good within the corrupt. Tolkien briefly uncovers much within this short passage, and although his words are few, they brim with meaning. Tolkien begins by describing Sam as cocky and a bit conceited, suggesting he is naturally self-assured and perhaps even a little self-important. However, his self-worth is tied not to personal ambition, but to his role as Frodo's servant and protector, and therein lies the subtle flaw in Sam's relationship with Frodo. Sam's love carries an element of possessiveness and pride. To commit oneself completely to another often implies a claim to their well-being. However, the most significant part of the passage is Tolkien's insight that Sam's fierce loyalty is unexpectedly detrimental to their relationship, as it prevents him from fully understanding Frodo as their journey progresses. Frodo changes. He begins to see the world through weary, sorrowful eyes. Through suffering, he gains wisdom. He learns to feel compassion for even corrupt beings like Gollum and recognizes the inherent tragedy in those who have been tainted by darkness. This is what Tolkien means by Frodo's slow education in the nobility of service to the unlovable, to show kindness to the reviled, and to see the lingering spark of humanity within the most degenerate. This is the truest form of compassion. Thus, Frodo's heart opens to Gollum in painful acknowledgement, but Sam, steadfast in his simpler view of morality, has not reached this level of understanding and is unable to comprehend why Frodo shows Gollum compassion. Consequently, he taunts Gollum, calling him harsh names like Stinker and Slinker. A portion of Tolkien's brilliance lies in these quiet revelations. Even in Sam, one of the most steadfast and beloved characters, we find flaws. His loyalty is genuine but flawed. His love is unwavering yet possessive. Sam undoubtedly did not fully understand Frodo's motives or his distress during the incident at the Forbidden Pool. If he had grasped better what was happening between Frodo and Gollum, things might have turned out differently in the end. The scene at the Forbidden Pool unfolds in the films much as it does in the books. Gollum, ever cunning and watchful, is lured away from the water by Frodo. He is then seized, and although Frodo's intention was to save his life, Gollum initially believes that Frodo has betrayed him. In the films, this moment becomes a wound that cannot heal. Gollum's anger festers even as Sam insists that Frodo never wished him harm. Gollum's heart hardens. Any slight warmth he held for Frodo is cast aside from that point on. The path he chooses is clear. He leads Frodo and Sam onward with a single, shocking purpose: to bring them to Shelob. There is no flicker of doubt in his mind. However, in the book, the threads of affection that tie Gollum to Frodo are not so easily severed. Although the sting of Frodo's betrayal leaves its mark, Gollum ultimately realizes that Frodo saved his life. Gollum, for all his flaws, is not a creature without reason. He understands that Frodo did not wish for him to suffer, and Faramir himself informed Gollum that the only reason he had saved his life was due to Frodo's pleas. After the trio departed from Faramir, Gollum affirmed that he held no lingering hatred toward Frodo. "Have they done at last?" said Gollum. "Cruel man. Smeagol's heart still hurts him." "Yes, it does. Let's go." "Yes, let us go," said Frodo. "But if you can only speak ill of those who showed you kindness, keep quiet." "Nice master," said Gollum. Smeagol was only joking, always forgiving. He did, yes, even nice master's little tricks. "Oh yes, nice master, nice Smeagol." In the books, Gollum hesitates, uncertain and torn, even as he leads Frodo ever closer to the lair of Shelob. And even as the sheer cliffs of Morgul rise before him and the darkness of his purpose closes in, what remains of his moral resolve battles against the ring's influence, which compels Gollum to lead Frodo to his death by temporizing, not fully settling the still not entirely corrupted Smeagol toward good in the struggle. In the Slag Hole, he weakened himself for the final chance when the dawning love of Frodo was too easily withered by the jealousy of Sam. Before Shelob's lair, the term temporizing refers to Gollum's tendency to delay decisive action or commitment. This indecision is corrosive, allowing his darker instincts to gain the upper hand. The phrase "not fixing the still not wholly corrupt Smeagol" will confirm that there was still a goodness within him represented by the Smeagol side of his persona. However, by failing to be decisive and solidifying this goodness, Gollum weakens his own moral resolve. The debate in the Slag Hole that Tolkien speaks of is the scene at the end of the Passage of the Marshes where Sam wakes to hear Gollum locked in debate with himself. We want it. But here there was a long pause, as if a new thought had awakened. "Not yet, perhaps. Not she might help. She might, yes, no, not that way," wailed Smeagol. "Yes, we want it. We want it." Each time that the second thought spoke, Gollum's long hand crept out slowly, pointing towards Frodo, and then was drawn back with a jerk as Smeagol spoke again. Finally both arms with long fingers flexed and twitching clawed towards his neck, as we can see Gollum's better nature protests the idea of leading Frodo to his death. Gollum never finishes this train of thought as Sam interrupts him, so as he does not come to a decision, he temporizes, as Tolkien puts it, meaning he puts off the decision for later. It is important to understand why this decision was so hard for him to make. Gollum had been cast out, shunned, and abandoned love, companionship, and understanding had long eluded him until Frodo and Frodo Smeagol had found a kindred spirit, perhaps the only one in all of Middle-earth, who could truly fathom his torment, and due to Frodo's kindness Smeagol felt understood for the first time since the ring came to him. Frodo and the ring were the two things in the world that Gollum loved, and he could not have both even as they ascended the treacherous pass of Caroth, Anul, passing the fortress of the Nazgul perched upon the knees of the mountain. He had still not come to a decision about what he would do before they reached Shelob's lair. The hobbits are weary, and decide to take some much-needed rest before continuing on to the ominous tunnel. It is then that Gollum slipped away into the darkness, leaving the hobbits alone for a while, and as Frodo slept with his head cradled in Sam's lap, Sam too succumbed to exhaustion, and so Gollum found them hours later when he returned crawling and creeping down the path out of the gloom. Ahead Sam sat, propped against the stone, his head dropping sideways, and his breathing heavy. In his lap lay Frodo's head, drowned deep in sleep. Upon his white forehead lay one of Sam's brown hands, and the other lay softly upon his master's breast. Peace was in both their faces. Gollum looked at them. A strange expression passed over his lean, hungry face. The gleam faded from his eyes, and they went dim and grey, old and tired. A spasm of pain seemed to twist him, and he turned away, peering back up towards the pass, shaking his head as if engaged in some interior debate. Then he came back and slowly putting out a trembling hand very cautiously, he touched Frodo's knee, but almost the touch was a caress. For a fleeting moment, could one of the sleepers have seen him, they would have thought that they beheld an old weary hobbit shrunken by the years that had carried him far beyond his time, beyond friends and kin, and the fields and streams of youth, an old starved pitiable thing in that still and quiet moment. The sincerity of Gollum's affection for Frodo is made apparent to the reader. There is no cunning now, no twisted ploy. Both hobbits lie asleep unaware of his presence. There is no one to deceive, no eyes to witness. Therefore we can discern with all certainty that the emotion that stirred within him in that moment is genuine, and as his gaze drifts back up the winding path, the weight of his betrayal lays heavily upon his conscience, and there in the gloom of Morgal Vale the hobbit he once was returned. For a fleeting heartbeat the path before him shifts. He teeters on the edge of redemption, nearly deciding to relinquish the ring, and to remain true to Frodo, but then like the bitter winds that swept down from the dark peaks of the Eel Duath, that loomed above them, Sam's harsh words shattered his moment of introspection. But at that touch, Frodo stirred and cried out softly in his sleep, and immediately Sam was wide awake. The first thing he saw was Gollum pawing at Master, and he thought, "Hey you," he said roughly, "what are you up to?" "Nothing, nothing," said Gollum softly. "Nice, Master." "I dare say," said Sam. "Where have you been, sneaking off and sneaking back, you old villain?" Gollum withdrew himself, and a green glint flickered under his heavy lids. Almost spider-like, he looked now, crouched back on his bent limbs with his protruding eyes. The fleeting moment had passed beyond recall. Sam's harsh words caused the delicate thread that held Gollum back from the abyss to snap in that very moment, and it is this tragedy that brought Tolkien to tears as he wrote it. He wept for the lonely old hobbit that might have been saved if not for Sam's inability to take pity upon him. I was probably most moved by Sam's disquisition on the seamless web of story, and by the scene when Frodo goes to sleep on his breast, and the tragedy of Gollum, who at that moment came within a hair of repentance, but for one rough word from Sam. This means that if it were not for Sam's actions in that pivotal moment, the hobbits could have avoided that dark tunnel that awaited, thick with webs and crawling with ancient hunger. Tolkien confirms in letter 246 that before this point, Shelob's lair was not a certainty for me. Perhaps the most tragic moment in the tale is when Sam fails to note the complete change in Gollum's tone and aspect. "Nothing, nothing," said Gollum softly. "Nice, Master." His repentance is blighted, and all Frodo's pity is wasted. Shelob's lair became inevitable. We should not blame Sam for his actions, for due to the situation and circumstances, few would have acted any differently towards Gollum. He was not to know the consequences of his actions, and those actions were, after all, based upon good motivations in their essence. He desired to protect his friend from Gollum. Yes, this protection may have been tainted with jealousy and pride, but the essence of Sam's actions was good. This is due, of course, to the logic of the story. Sam could hardly have acted differently. He did reach the point of pity at last, but for the good of Gollum, too late, of course. In none of these quotes does Tolkien mention that he wept over this scene. That is because his admission was not put down in writing, but rather made at a quite exceptional event in March of 1958. Tolkien was the guest of honor at a hobbit meal in Rotterdam, Holland. He had never before accepted such an invitation, and never did again. In a wonderful exchange that was recorded between Tolkien and Professor Lamb, Tolkien makes his admission. "Is there really no deeper meaning in The Lord of the Rings?" asked Lambers. "It's just a story." "It's just a story," reacted Tolkien passionately. "Yes, but a story with a message," continued Lamb, arguing the moral background of The Lord of the Rings as an example. He took that impressive scene on the border of Mordor when Gollum bends over the sleeping Frodo, torn between Gollum's love for the ring and Smeagol's word of honor to Frodo not to take it. The crucial element in this scene, according to Lambers, is distrust, which causes good to act as evil. Gollum is mollified by the vulnerability of the sleeping hobbit and is at the point of redemption, but Sam, misguided by the love for his master, intervenes and thus prevents the rebirth of Smeagol. Sam's goodness makes the goodness of Gollum impossible, and Tolkien answered, "I wept when I wrote that." Here Lambert makes a stirring defense of Tolkien's work, as Tolkien modestly states that The Lord of the Rings is just a story. Of course, The Lord of the Rings is technically just a story, yet that is no bad thing. Storytelling remains our oldest and truest compass. Stories are the echo of the voices of the past. They bind us across time and distance to those who came before us and remind us of who we are. Stories can teach us lessons we didn't know we needed to learn, heal wounds we didn't know we carried, and awaken dreams we forgot we ever had. And stories, of course, can move us to tears. Thus, I will leave you now with the immortal words of Gandalf. I will not say, do not weep, for not all tears are an evil. Music. Thank you very much for tuning in to Realms Unraveled. I would like to take this opportunity to light the beacons and call for aid. If you did enjoy this video, I would be very grateful if you would click the like button below and consider subscribing to the channel. And until next time, farewell, fellow explorers of Middle-earth.